Nobody in Corin Vale ever called me by my name if they could help it. Mason would do, or hand, or that earth thing, said the way you'd say door hinge or roof beam. A fact about the keep, not a man in it. I'd repointed half the wall myself over 6 winters, reset the gate stones after the frost heave, and not once in all that time had anyone in the high hall asked what I thought about anything. I hadn't minded. A man can build a life out of quiet work and a wife who looks at him like he's worth the trouble, and for 6 years that had been enough for me. Vantha Sel Corin never once made me feel small for it. Her court did that plenty on its own. The morning Kesh Talvorn rode into the yard with his bannermen and his easy, carrying laugh. I was up on the north scaffold with a chisel in my hand, and I heard him before I saw him. He had a voice built for rooms, the kind that finds every corner without trying. "Tell me, Your Grace," he said, loud enough for the whole courtyard to catch it. "Is it true you married your wallkeep mason?" I kept working. That was the trick of it. You keep working, and let the stone tell people you're not listening. "He keeps the keep standing," Vantha said. I could hear the steel under it, the same steel she used on tax disputes and border grievances. "That is more than most men in this yard have managed." Kesh laughed, not unkindly, which was somehow worse. A keep needs walls. A queen needs a consort who can hold a border when the walls fail. I've held 3. He looked up at the scaffold, found me there, and gave me the kind of nod you'd give a good dog. No offense meant, Mason. None taken, I didn't say. I never did say much, up there. It wasn't dignity exactly. I'd just never found the right moment, in 6 years, to explain myself to a court that had already decided what I was. He challenged me that afternoon, in front of the whole hall, the old border right, the one that let a claimant test a consort's worth with steel instead of argument. Vantha could have refused it, the law let her. But refusing it, in front of a warlord with 3 border holds already, would have cost her something she couldn't afford to lose twice, not with the eastern passes as thin on defenders as they'd been since the spring floods took the garrison at Reth's Ford. I remembered the day I'd married her, 6 years back, in a small ceremony the court had barely bothered to attend. A handful of stewards, the keep chaplain, and Vantha in a plain gray gown she'd chosen herself, because she said she was tired of wearing other people's idea of a queen. Nobody had warned me, back then, what 6 years of quiet condescension would feel like, worn down slow like water on stone. I'd told myself it didn't matter what the hall thought, as long as she never looked at me that way. She never had, not once, in 6 years, had she made me feel like a fact about the keep instead of a man in it. That was worth more to me than any title Kesh Talvorn had ever won on a battlefield, and I'd have gone on quietly believing that was enough, right up until the moment the right forced the question into the open air where everyone could see it. "You don't have to do this," she told me that night, in the room above the gate where the wind came through the shutter gaps no matter how many times I recocked them. "I can find another way to answer him." "I know," I said. "I'm doing it anyway." She didn't ask me if I could win. I loved her for that, among other things. She never once asked me to prove myself to her, only to everyone else, and only because the everyone else had teeth. The storm came in 2 nights before the duel, the kind that rolls down off the Corin peaks with lightning that walks the ridgeline instead of striking once and quitting. I was in the old watchtower at the northeast corner, the one nobody used anymore because half its floor had dropped away a generation back, checking that the loose capstone hadn't shifted in the wind. That's where the hollow echo lived, an old device, predating even the Vale's oldest records, a slab of dark, faintly ridged stone set into the tower's inner wall that the keep's stewards had always called sleeping. Nobody remembered what it was for, just that on the rare nights when the lightning struck the ridge just right, it woke, and showed you something. It woke that night. The light came up out of the stone slow, the way frost comes up on a window, and then the tower wall wasn't a wall anymore. It was the pass, the eastern one, the narrow throat of rock above Reth's Ford, 6 years back, the winter before Vantha and I had married. I knew the place. I'd worked stone there once, repairing a washed-out culvert, months before anyone in the Vale had ever heard my name. I watched myself hold it. A raiding band, a dozen strong, coming down through the mist after the villagers who'd fled the flood, and one man, alone, no armor to speak of, using a collapsed section of scaffold and a mason's crowbar because it was what he had in his hands when the first rider came through the fog. I remembered the night. I'd never told anyone about it. There'd been no one left to tell. The villagers had scattered by morning, and I'd walked on to the next job, and the next, until I'd walked as far as Corin Vale and never thought to mention it, because what was there to mention? I'd held a pass for one bad night with a crowbar and my own stubbornness, and nobody had died who didn't have to, and that had seemed like the end of it. The vision held a long time, long enough that half the keep had gathered at the tower door by the time it faded, drawn by the light through the old arrow slits, stewards, guards, Kesh Talvorn himself with his bannermen behind him, and Vantha at the front of all of them, still in her night robe, staring at the fading stone like she'd forgotten how to breathe. Nobody said anything for a long moment. Then Kesh did, quieter than I'd ever heard him. That was Reth's Ford. 6 years back. I know that pass. I lost men trying to hold it 2 seasons after, with a full garrison. He looked at me. You held it alone. I fixed a culvert, I said. The rest just happened. Vantha crossed the tower floor toward me without a word to anyone else in the room. Not the steward, not the warlord, not the guards who parted for her without being told to. She stopped in front of me, and for the first time since I'd known her, I watched her look for words, and not find any easily. 6 years, she finally said, and you never told me. Didn't seem worth the telling. It was one night. It was the night that Pass held, she said, so that the people who fled Reth's Ford had somewhere to flee to. I know the names of every family that survived that winter. I've never known the name of the man who bought them the time. Her hand found my sleeve, the way it had the day I'd asked her to marry me, quiet and certain. Callum Ash, she said, loud enough now that the tower carried it. That was his name. That is his name. He is not my wall keep mason. He is the man who held Reth's Ford alone, and he has been standing in this keep for 6 years while every one of you called him nothing. She turned to Kesh. There will be no duel. You came to test whether I'd married beneath my house. I have not. I have married a man your 3 garrisons together could not have equaled in one night, with a crowbar and no one watching. Kesh looked at me a long moment, and something in his face gave way, not defeat exactly, more like a man revising a math he'd trusted too long. He inclined his head, slow and real. Then I withdraw the challenge, Your Grace. And Mason, he caught himself, shook his head once. Callum, my apologies. I've fought beside men with a fraction of what that pass asked of you. I didn't have a speech in me. I'd never needed one before, and I didn't reach for one now. I just looked at Vantha, and she looked back at me the way she had the very first day, before any court had decided what I was worth, like I was simply a man she'd chosen, and the choosing had never needed anyone else's permission. I'll fix that capstone in the morning, I told her, because it was true, and because it was the only kind of vow I'd ever known how to make. I know you will, she said, and didn't let go of my sleeve. You always do. The storm broke by dawn. I went up the scaffold same as any other morning, chisel in hand, and for the first time in 6 years, when the stewards passed below, they said my name.